Hey kids, Mr. Taha here, and we are in realistic fiction lesson number 17, and we're going to study the story elements. Did you know that every person that writes a story, every author, really only writes about one thing? They're trying to deliver one message to you. So that means that every word, every sentence, every phrase, every paragraph, every chapter is devoted to delivering that one message to you. And we can designate all those sentences and all those words into 5 basic categories that we call the story elements. An author is going to use the story elements to deliver the story to you. So if we know the story elements, we can figure out what the author means to tell us. So today we are learning to interpret or explain the meaning of our books by studying characters and other story elements. The word interpret it means to translate. So technically what we're doing is we are translating the author's book into what the author wants us to understand, the author's thinking. So we're trying to figure out exactly what was in the author's brain when they wrote the book. So the author uses 5 basic story elements. These things: the plot, what happened; the characters, who was involved in that thing; the setting, where and when did it take place. Did it take place in a spaceship in the future? Did it take place in the Revolutionary War? Did it take place today in a regular school? Then there's the conflict. What are the characters struggling with in the story? You will note that every story is about trouble. So what's the conflict? And the last thing, the theme. What lesson did you, the reader, learn? Or more appropriately, what is the author trying to teach you? Maybe sometimes we don't learn it, but the author's trying to teach you something. That's the one thing they're trying to get across to you. So readers, that's us, interpret or explain the meaning of or translate books by thinking about all those things, the characters and the other story elements. So just like a jigsaw puzzle, how each individual piece might not make a whole lot of sense by itself. So if you look at individual story elements, just characters, just setting, just conflict, just plot, you might not be able to make a lot of sense out of it. It's by looking at it and studying it and putting them all together that we realize that it makes one big picture. So when things all add up in the text, readers are making an interpretation. We are figuring out the meaning of the book. So let's try some interpretation here. Here is a section of The Tiger Rising, when Sistine arrives at the Kentucky Star and she goes and checks out the motel room that Rob and his dad are living in. So let me just read this section to you here. And so he took her to the motel room, and there Sistine stood and stared at the unmade beds and the tattered recliner. Her eyes moved over his father's gun case and then went to the macaroni pan from the night before, still sitting on the hot plate. She looked at it all the same way she looked at the Kentucky Star sign and the motel and him, like she was trying to add it up in her head. This is kind of a funny section for this lesson because what Sistine is doing is she is trying to interpret Rob's situation. She's trying to make sense of Rob, just as we are trying to interpret what's going on in the book. So it's kind of a funny little coincidence that we're doing here. But so what I'm going to do is I'm going to read that section again. I'm just sort of silently, before we move on, just sort of look at that section and kind of think about what I've just seen here. So I can see that there are things like unmade beds and a tattered recliner. So I'm just trying to look at all the different story elements. So I see that Kate DiCamillo has described some setting: unmade beds, tattered recliner, the gun case, the macaroni pan that's still on the hot plate, and the Kentucky Star sign. So all these things Kate DiCamillo decided to include in this paragraph. Remember, writers don't write anything by accident. All those things are there for a reason. Why does Kate DiCamillo tell us all about the unmade beds and the tattered recliner and the father's gun case? What is happening in there? And so when we look at it, we're going to look at all these things, the setting and the plot and the mood, and to see if anything recurs. A recurring object means, does Kate DiCamillo keep on mentioning the same stuff over and over again in the book? And I do know that she mentions things like the Kentucky star sign a lot, and also Rob's rash a lot. So you will see that sometimes authors will make things happen over and over again. And if they do that, they're trying to tell you this is important, and just so you should look at it and see what makes it so important. So if I think about all those things, I'll take some of them and put them here. Some of the story elements that I've got are the setting, the unmade beds, the macaroni pan that's not washed, still sitting on the hot plate, the gun case, and that recurring detail, the Kentucky star sign. You see how I've made a T-chart here? It's a good thing for you to try in your read aloud notebook or a piece of paper to figure out if there's anything that we can pay attention to. So I put down setting things and a recurring detail. I didn't really write any character stuff, not in this section. So now what can we interpret from that information? Well, the unmade beds and the macaroni pan that's not washed. I think Sistine is trying to figure out, just as we are, that Rob and his dad are lost without Rob's mom. They can't make their beds. They can't even wash a pan. Well, I guess it's hard to wash a pan in a hotel room, but they can still use the bathroom sink, but they're not even doing that. Why aren't they doing that? Do they not know how? Is Rob's dad too busy? Maybe too tired? Does Rob not care or does not know how to do it? So what we're doing is we're trying to use those little teeny tiny details to figure out what Rob and his dad are like, because Kate DiCamillo clearly wants us to see that. So let's try this gun case. Now, you've probably noticed it too. Why did she include that? What would she want with putting that in there? Well, I gotta say, the only thing I can think of is that gun's gonna be used by somebody in the story, maybe against somebody in the story. There's no way that she would just include the gun case and that her dad is, that Rob's dad looks at the gun case and all that stuff. There's gotta be a reason for that. That gun is going to come into the story somewhere. So it's gonna be something I'm gonna look for. And then that Kentucky star sign, she always talks about the Kentucky star sign. From the very, very first chapter, she does it all the time. And why does she do that? Well, maybe because it represents a falling star that Rob wishes on. He kind of looks at it and he wishes for a friend. And so it kind of reminds him of Kentucky. So again, this notion of wishes that he hopes to come true at one point. Now, by the way, I could be completely wrong about all of this. I could be dead wrong. And that'd be okay too, because I'm still trying to make meaning of it. I don't have to guess it all right. And later on, if I decide to change my mind, it's perfectly fine. And that's one of the fun things about reading, is that you can interpret things based on the information you have, and you could be completely wrong and you can change it as you go. That's how we engage the story. So remember, when we interpret or explain the meaning of books, we think about the characters and other story elements like the setting and the recurring objects or the images and things that happen in the plot. So you should try that today. In your own book, find a passage that tells you a lot about the characters or the setting or the plot or uses a recurring object. That way you know that one is a really, really information-rich area. Your author is going to do that for you. You just got to find it. So then do these steps. 1, reread the passage. Look at it again and really, really kind of look at it like a detective trying to find clues. Take note of the specific details about the characters or the setting or the plot events or the recurring details. Just write them down in a T-chart. And then ask yourself, what can I figure out from this? When you do that, just grow an idea. Have an idea in your head and start growing it. Develop it. Write about it in your reading response journal. That work is you interpreting those clues, that information into meaning. And it will help you enjoy the book so much more, because now you and the author are connecting brain to brain. You're trying to figure out how the author thinks. And you could be wrong, That's also a lot of fun. But no matter what, you are engaging with the book and the author. So have fun with it. Until next time, I'm Mr. Ta.